Evelyn Carter woke up early that morning as sunlight slipped through the small gap in the curtains. The light fell across her round belly and the soft blue blanket she had sewn for her baby. She smiled and touched her stomach gently, feeling the little kick that came in reply. The baby was due in 3 weeks, and she had already picked a name if it was a girl. She had not told anyone yet because she wanted it to be a surprise for her husband, Daniel. Daniel Carter was a busy man. He worked as an architect in a large city firm and often came home late. His work made him proud and restless at the same time. He loved success more than peace. When he was home, he smiled and said kind words. But his eyes always looked far away, as if chasing something that was not there. Evelyn believed that when the baby came, everything would change. She believed Daniel would come home early, hold her close, and see life through her eyes. Their house stood at the edge of town, near a river that ran quietly behind their garden. The nursery was the brightest room, painted pale yellow. Evelyn had chosen small animal stickers for the walls and a white cradle that had once belonged to her grandmother, moved around slowly and carefully, arranging little shoes and folding baby clothes. She hummed a tune her mother used to sing when she was a child. On the other side of town, Daniel sat in a meeting room surrounded by sharp suits and high voices. He kept checking his phone, not for news of the baby, but for a message from Claire Mercer. Claire worked as his firm's interior consultant. She was confident, clever, and knew how to say words that made Daniel feel young and brave. Their affair had begun quietly one night after a company party. He told himself it was harmless, that Evelyn never needed to know. What began as small moments of comfort turned into regular meetings hidden behind work schedules. Claire was waiting that morning in a coffee shop, and Daniel was thinking of her smile while pretending to listen to his coworkers. He had promised to take her to the awards dinner that evening. It was a big night for him. His project, a sleek city tower, was nominated for a major design award. His mother, Lillian, insisted she would go too. She did not like Evelyn much and said Evelyn made Daniel smaller. Lillian was proud of her son and wanted him to find someone who matched his ambition. Claire seemed perfect in her eyes. Evelyn knew none of this. She thought marriage was like a garden that only needed patience and love. When Daniel came home that afternoon, she showed him the new baby blanket she had finished. He kissed her cheek quickly and said he had a dinner to attend. He promised he would call her later and left in a hurry. Evelyn looked at the door after it closed and felt a short wave of sadness. Still, she smiled because she loved him. The sky outside turned gray, heavy with clouds. A soft rain began to fall, and she moved to the window. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and whispered that the baby would soon meet the world. She sat on the couch with her phone beside her, waiting for a message. None came, but she convinced herself Daniel must be busy. The hotel ballroom, laughter and music filled the air. Daniel looked handsome in his black suit. Claire stood beside him in a red dress and curled her arm through his. Lillian joined them, excited and proud. She asked Daniel not to check his phone again, saying he could deal with family later. He smiled weakly and nodded. Back home, Evelyn's neighbor, Mrs. Lewis, stopped by to bring her soup and company. They spoke for a while, and Evelyn laughed at a story about Mrs. Lewis's grandchildren. When she was alone again, she took a deep breath and lowered herself into the rocking chair. She held a small notebook on her lap and began to write a letter to her unborn child. She wrote that the baby should always look for kindness in people, that the world could be hard, but love made it gentle. She hoped she would be a good mother, the way her own had been. Thunder rumbled far away, and the lights flickered. She looked down at her belly and whispered softly that everything would be fine. She pictured Daniel walking through the door with flowers. She imagined the baby smiling with his same bright eyes. In her heart, she felt safe. She did not know that her world was slowly moving toward the night that would test every promise she had ever believed in. Outside, the river moved steadily under the darkening clouds, carrying reflections of a house filled with hope, waiting for a man who would not return that night. The rain kept falling in steady rhythm, as if the sky knew things the people below did not. Evelyn held her notebook close, unaware that before the next dawn, her note would be the last words she would ever write. And yet the first gift her children would ever receive. The evening began with laughter and bright lights at the grand hotel ballroom. Daniel stood near the stage with a glass of wine in his hand, while the crowd clapped for the award winners. His mind was far away, even as Claire Mercer leaned close and whispered about their future plans. He smiled politely, but the words did not feel as warm as they used to. The sound of music and cheerful voices filled the large room. The smell of perfume and wine mixed in the air like a strange fog. Daniel tried to tell himself that everything was perfect and that he deserved this night of success. Back in her quiet house, Evelyn felt a sharp pain in her lower belly. She gasped and held the armrest of the chair. The pain came again, stronger. Her heart started beating fast. She looked at the clock and saw that it was only 9. She reached for her phone on the table and called Daniel, but the call went unanswered. She left a message telling him she thought the baby was coming early. Her voice trembled as she spoke, but she tried to stay calm. After a few minutes, her neighbor, Mrs. Lewis, heard the noise and rushed over. She found Evelyn on the floor, holding her belly and breathing hard. Mrs. Lewis called for an ambulance at once. Evelyn kept whispering Daniel's name, saying he would come soon. She believed he would walk into the hospital room and be there to hold her hand. At the hotel, Daniel's phone buzzed many times in his pocket. He did not hear the calls because the noise in the ballroom was too loud. Claire was laughing beside him, telling a story to Lillian and some business partners. Lillian praised her son for his success and mentioned how much better he looked now that he had stopped worrying about home matters. Daniel nodded, but a part of him began to feel uneasy. When the stage lights changed color, he stepped aside to take a breath. Meanwhile, the ambulance carried Evelyn through the rain to the hospital. The nurse checked her pulse and spoke softly to keep her calm. Evelyn asked if someone could call her husband. The nurse promised to try. Evelyn closed her eyes and prayed in silence. She thought of Daniel's face, the sound of his laugh, and the way he had held her hand the day they found out she was pregnant. She whispered that she forgave him for being busy because she knew that love was about believing. When Daniel finally looked at his phone, he saw 8 missed calls and 2 voice messages from the hospital. His chest went cold, stepped away from the noise and called back. The nurse told him that Evelyn was in surgery. His voice shook as he asked if she was safe. The nurse said things were serious and that he should come right away. Daniel turned toward the table where Claire and Lillian were sitting. Claire noticed the fear on his face and asked what was wrong. He told them Evelyn was in the hospital. Lillian frowned and said the doctors could handle it, reminded him that his big award announcement was about to start. Daniel looked at the stage, then at his mother, and felt something tear inside him. Still he hesitated. Claire placed her hand on his arm and whispered that going now would not change anything. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to stay in the bright light where the world seemed safe. But the thought of Evelyn lying alone broke through his fear. He grabbed his coat and left the ballroom without turning back. Outside, the rain had turned heavy, soaking his suit as he searched for a taxi. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly as Evelyn's blood pressure dropped. The nurse kept telling her to stay awake. Evelyn whispered Daniel's name again and again. She thought she heard his voice in the hallway, but it was only the wind and the sound of doors closing. Her breathing grew slower, but she felt a faint movement in her belly. It was the baby, strong and alive. She smiled weakly and whispered that everything would be fine. By the time Daniel reached the hospital doors, the lights in the maternity ward were dim. He ran to the front desk and asked for Evelyn. The nurse on duty looked at him with sad eyes. She told him to wait outside. Inside the room, a doctor removed his gloves and sighed. The monitor let out a steady sound. Evelyn lay still, her hand resting open beside her. Her wedding ring caught the faint light from the window. The doctor wrote something on the chart and left the room, carrying a quiet sorrow with him. Daniel waited with his mother and Claire in the cold white hallway. He kept looking at the closed door, hoping someone would tell him that everything was fine. Rain fell against the windows, and thunder rolled far in the distance. Lillian sighed as if the night had gone on too long. Claire looked at her phone, trying to avoid Daniel's shaking hands. They did not notice when the doctor turned the corner and walked toward them. His face was pale and tired. Daniel stood up at once. But before the doctor spoke, he already knew that the words would break his heart. Daniel could not hear anything for a short while. The doctor's voice faded into the background. The world around him turned quiet, as if every sound had been taken away. The words kept turning in his mind. Evelyn was gone. The woman who had smiled every morning and waited by the window each night was gone forever. His chest felt as if someone had pulled the ground away from under him. Lillian stood beside him with her arms crossed. She gave a slow nod and said that life could be cruel, but there was no use in crying forever. Claire took Daniel's hand and whispered that he should accept it and think about moving forward. She imagined that the path ahead was now clear. With Evelyn gone, she saw herself by Daniel's side, living in comfort and wealth. The idea made her heart rush. She tried to hide the faint smile that came to her lips. Daniel turned his face toward her and saw that slight curve. Something cold ran through his stomach. He pulled his hand away. His mother noticed but did not say anything. She went to speak to the nurse about what would happen next. The air in the hallway smelled of disinfectant and rain. People walked past quietly with tired faces. The doctor took a slow step toward Daniel again. His tone had changed. It carried both sadness and a strange trace of hope. He said that Evelyn's delivery had not ended as expected. There had not been one child as they first thought. There were two. Both were alive but frail. He added that Evelyn had used every last breath to help them survive. Daniel felt the color leave his face. His heart stopped for a second, and then started again stronger than before. He asked the doctor to show him the babies. Lillian's mouth opened in shock. She said that this would only make the grief harder, that it might be better to wait. Daniel ignored her. Claire said that maybe the doctor was mistaken, but her voice trembled. She could see that this changed everything. Daniel followed the doctor down the empty corridor. The soft beeping of hospital machines filled the air. They stopped near a glass window that looked into the nursery room. Inside, tiny cribs lined the walls, glowing under dim lights. Two of them stood side by side, each holding a small life wrapped in white cloth. The sound of their gentle cries reached Daniel's ears. It pierced through the fog that had covered his thoughts. He pressed his hands against the glass. The babies were so small that they looked like living miracles. Their fingers moved slowly and their chests rose and fell in perfect rhythm. One had a small curl of dark hair. The other wore a thin band from the hospital with a tiny name tag labeled Baby Carter. The nurses moved quietly around them with calm hands and caring faces. A nurse noticed Daniel and came to the door. She asked if he wanted to hold them. He could not speak but nodded. The nurse guided him inside. The soft light fell on Evelyn's folded note placed near the cribs. It had been found beside her. Daniel reached for it with shaking hands. The ink was smudged from sweat and tears. The words were simple. She had written that if she could not stay, she wanted the stars to love her children. Daniel bowed his head. His tears fell onto the note. When the nurse placed the baby boy in his arms, Daniel felt a weight that was both light and powerful. The child blinked and opened his tiny mouth to cry. Daniel whispered a promise to him, saying he would never let him feel loss. Then the nurse gave him the little girl. Her small face looked peaceful even in sleep. He could see Evelyn in her soft features. Behind him, Lillian walked in slowly. Her steps were heavy. When she saw the twins, her eyes filled with tears she did not expect. She had spent months wishing Evelyn would leave her son's life, yet now she saw the love that Evelyn left behind. She reached a trembling hand toward the babies but stopped halfway, afraid she did not deserve to touch them. She turned to Daniel and said that she was sorry. It was the first honest thing she had said in years. Claire stayed near the door, shifting from foot to foot. The confidence she had carried earlier was gone. She saw the way Daniel's gaze changed when he looked at the twins. She understood that there was no room for her in that love. She took a step back, whispering that she hoped he found peace, and left without turning around. Daniel sat in a chair near the nursery window. He held both children close to his chest. Outside, the rain began to slow. The doctor walked by and gave him a small nod before leaving them in silence. Daniel looked down at his children again. He felt a warmth spread in his heart, something new and alive. He realized that while his mistakes had cost him the woman he loved, they had given him two small reasons to begin again. He kissed their foreheads and whispered Evelyn's name. In that quiet moment, he knew she was still there in every breath the twins took and every heartbeat they shared. The night began to fade as morning light crept through the hospital windows, touching the faces of the two little lives who carried their mother's soul forward into the world. The morning sun rose over the city and filled the hospital room with pale light. Daniel sat near the window holding the two babies. They were sleeping quietly, wrapped in soft blankets. His eyes were red from crying, and his heart felt heavy, but the small sound of their breathing gave him a strange peace. The nurse came in to check on them. She smiled kindly and told him that both babies were strong. She said they had survived because their mother had refused to give up. Her words made Daniel look down at them again with pride and sorrow mixed together. A few hours later, Lillian walked into the room carrying a bouquet of white flowers. Her face looked tired, and her voice was quiet. She told Daniel that funeral plans needed to be made. He listened, but kept his focus on the twins. When she glanced at them, her eyes softened. She reached out a hand toward the baby girl and paused. Then she said that Evelyn must have been a strong woman to bring 2 children into the world alone. It was the first time she had spoken about Evelyn with respect. Daniel nodded but did not answer. His mind was full of memories. He remembered the last time he had truly looked at Evelyn. She had been smiling at him while holding a pillow against her stomach, as if she were practicing how she would cradle their baby. He had been thinking about work that day and had barely noticed. The guilt settled deep inside him. He turned his head toward the door when he heard footsteps. Claire stood there, holding her purse tightly. Her eyes looked blank and uncertain. She told Daniel that she was leaving town. She said she never meant to cause pain. Daniel looked at her for a long moment without anger, simply said that this was goodbye. She whispered a quiet wish of luck and walked away, her heels clicking down the hall. The sound faded until it was gone. Days passed. The funeral came quickly. The church was small and quiet. Rain fell again, as if the sky itself could feel sorrow. Daniel carried a single rose and placed it on Evelyn's casket. Lillian stood beside him, saying nothing. After everyone left, Daniel remained there alone with the sound of rain and the wind moving through the trees. He whispered that he was sorry and that he would be better from now on. He promised her that their children would have the life she had dreamed of for them. When he went home, the house felt different. The walls held memories of laughter and love that had turned into silence. The nursery was still unfinished. Small shoes were waiting in a row by the cradle. Daniel walked into the room and placed both babies in the cradle one by one. He watched them sleep and smiled faintly, whispered their names for the first time. The boy would be called Evan, the girl would be Lily. Weeks turned into months. Daniel learned how to feed them, hold them, and calm their cries. He had never known how much patience love required. Every night he told them stories about their mother. He said she was brave and gentle. He told them that she had loved them before she had ever seen them. When they slept, he sat quietly in the chair beside the cradle, holding Evelyn's old note in his hands. It had become his promise. Lillian visited often. She brought food and blankets and acted kinder than she ever had before. She took the babies in her arms and called them her little angels. Sometimes, Daniel caught her wiping tears away when she thought no one was looking. She often said that Evelyn had left a mark on her heart. It was clear that regret lived within her. She told Daniel she wanted to help raise the children and make right what she had done wrong. The neighbors came to visit as well. They said they saw light shining again from Daniel's house at night. They heard soft singing and laughter coming through the open windows. Slowly, the home that had felt so cold began to feel alive once more. One evening, Daniel carried the twins to the porch. The sunset was golden and filled the trees with warm colors. He sat on the old wooden step with one baby in each arm. The wind moved gently, and he looked up at the sky where the first star had begun to shine. He felt that Evelyn was near, watching them with her quiet smile. He told Lily and Evan that their mother was not gone but living around them in the stars, in the breeze, and in every sign of love they would ever find. The twins blinked and reached out their tiny hands toward the fading light as if they could touch her. Daniel laughed softly for the first time in many months. It had the sound of both sadness and hope. As the night settled and the stars grew brighter, he knew his life had changed in a way he could never undo. The pain would always stay, but it would live beside joy. The babies were his second chance, his path to forgiveness. He sat still for a long time, letting the sound of their breathing mix with the soft song of the wind. The house behind him glowed with warm light, and for the first time since that terrible night, Daniel truly believed that love could survive even after death. Spring came again, and the town looked new under the bright sun. The garden behind Daniel's house was full of flowers that Evelyn had planted the year before. He had taken care of them through the winter, feeling that each bloom kept a piece of her spirit alive. The twins had grown strong. Evan liked to pull at the grass, while Lily tried to chase butterflies that were always out of reach. Their laughter filled the yard and made the house feel warm and safe. Daniel watched them from the porch with quiet pride. Each day started early for him now. He woke the twins, fed them breakfast, and walked them in a stroller down the old road that led to the park. The neighbors always greeted them. Some remembered the dark days after Evelyn's death and smiled to see Daniel looking steady again. They said he was changing into the man Evelyn had believed he could become. Their words touched his heart, and he silently thanked Evelyn for never giving up on him. Lillian visited almost every day. She brought toys, baby clothes, and stories about her younger years. She had softened in ways Daniel never thought possible. She cleaned the kitchen, watched the twins whenever Daniel had to work, and often sat with them by the fire. At night when the twins were asleep, she and Daniel sometimes spoke about Evelyn. Lillian admitted she had judged her unfairly. She said she could now see how deeply Evelyn had loved her family. Daniel assured her that Evelyn would have forgiven her. That brought tears to Lillian's eyes, and she held her grandchildren closer every time she thought of it. Claire had not returned since the night she left the hospital. Daniel did not hate her. He had forgiven her in his heart, because carrying anger seemed useless now. He had learned that pain only healed when you let it go. He wished her a better life, far away from the one she had tried to steal. As the months passed, Daniel began to bring pieces of his old life back in gentle ways. He started working from home so he could stay with the twins. His office desk was beside the nursery window where sunlight poured in during the morning. Sometimes, while drawing plans for buildings, he would hum the same tune Evelyn used to sing when she was sewing baby clothes. It made the room feel alive again. When Evan said his first word, Daniel nearly cried. When Lily took her first step, he laughed and clapped his hands until she did it again. Small moments like these became his treasure. He began writing letters to Evelyn every Sunday, placing them in a wooden box on the shelf. Each letter began with "Dear Evelyn," and each ended with "Thank you for staying near us." The habit gave him peace. One evening, there was a festival in town. Lanterns hung across the streets, glowing in colors. Daniel took the twins there with Lillian. The children watched magicians and dancers with wide eyes. They tasted sweet candy for the first time and laughed so hard that strangers began to smile just by looking at them. When the band started playing music, Daniel lifted both children into his arms and spun slowly under the lights. The air smelled of sugar and smoke, and for the first time he felt joy without the sting of grief. Later that night, back home, the twins fell asleep quickly. Daniel stood outside on the porch again. The same porch where he had once cried into the dark sky now felt different. He looked at the stars and imagined Evelyn standing among them, quiet and proud. He whispered that the children were safe and that he was keeping his promise. A soft wind passed through the trees and he felt warmth brush his cheek. It was gentle and full of love. Years moved forward, and the twins grew taller. They often sat by Daniel's side, asking him stories about their mother. He told them everything he could remember. Said she loved the rain, that she used to dance in the kitchen, and that she had a heart bigger than the world. Lily once asked if their mother ever truly left. Daniel smiled and said that some people never leave because love ties them to us forever. She liked that answer so much that she wrote it on her school notebook. By the time the twins were old enough to start school, the house had become a joyful place again. The photographs of Evelyn were on every wall, surrounded by drawings the twins had made. Lillian lived nearby and came every morning to help make breakfast. Daniel no longer felt the heavy silence in every room. Instead, the sound of laughter and little feet had filled all the empty spaces. One peaceful evening, when the sun was setting in golden light, Daniel sat with the twins on the porch steps, watching the sky change colors. He told them that when they were born, their mother gave everything she had to keep them alive. He said her love began this new life for them, and that they carried her spirit wherever they went. Evan leaned his head on his father's shoulder, and Lily held his hand. Daniel looked up once more, as if he could see Evelyn smiling back. The air felt full of calm. As the stars appeared one by one, Daniel whispered that no love ends when the heart remains open. The sound of the twins' soft laughter drifted into the night, mixing with the song of crickets and the hum of the summer wind. The world felt complete again, and in that quiet peace, Daniel understood that both loss and love could live side by side. Evelyn's presence was still there, not as a shadow of sadness, but as the light that guided them all toward tomorrow.